For section 8.2 day 2, we're going to use the trigonometric ratios that we learned yesterday to help us solve for a missing side in our right triangle. So let's start with our first example, find BC to the nearest hundredth. So I always like to start with putting a variable such as x on that missing side that I am looking for. So the acute angle that they give us is angle A. So I'm going to go ahead and circle that like we did yesterday. Then I'm going to figure out what information we know. So I can see that across from my right angle, I have 4 inches, so that would represent my hypotenuse. And then if I'm trying to find x, well, that's across from my acute angle, so that would be my opposite side. We don't need to do anything with our adjacent side for this problem. If you want to write it in, you can, but we don't need to use that side AB at all. So since we are trying to find our opposite side, we are given our hypotenuse. So we would look up at the top where we have SOHCAHTOA, and the one that uses O and H is going to be sine. So I'm going to set up my equation. Sine of A equals opposite over hypotenuse. Okay, so now I'm going to substitute in what I know. So I know that angle A is really 23 degrees. We're calling our opposite side x, and then our hypotenuse we know is 4 inches. So if we're trying to solve for x, we want to get rid of that 4 on the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply both sides by 4. So now these 4's will cancel each other out. We have 4 times the sine of 23 equals x. If you go ahead and type that into your calculator, you will get a decimal 1.562 and so on for your x. And then our directions did say to find BC to the nearest hundredth. So we're going to look at the number in the thousands place, and that one tells us to round down. So x equals 1.56 inches. Make sure you remember your units if you are given them. Okay. Moving on to our next example. It says to find QR to the nearest hundredth. So for this example, QR would represent x, and we are given the acute angle P. So x is representing the opposite side because it's across from our acute angle that we are given. And then 8.1 meters, that is representing our adjacent side. It is not our hypotenuse. It is not across from our right angle. Okay, so since we are working with our opposite side and our adjacent side, the O and the A, that tells us to use tangent. So for this one, I would say tangent of P equals opposite over adjacent. Then I'm going to plug in what I know. So I know that my angle is 50 degrees. My opposite side I am calling x, and then my adjacent side we know is 8.1. So if we're solving for x, we can multiply both sides by 8.1. That gets the 8.1 out of the denominator. Then if you type that into your calculator, 8.1 times tangent of 50, you get 9.653 something. And then if we're rounding to the nearest hundredth, look at that number in the thousands place. That tells us we can round down. So x equals 9.65 meters. Okay, let's move on to our next example. Our next example says to find QR to the nearest hundredth. So QR is right here. I'll call that X. And then I'm going to circle my acute angle that I am given, which is angle P. So then looking at the information on my triangle, I'm trying to find my opposite side. And I am given the side across from my right angle, which is my hypotenuse. So I'm working with O and H. So that tells me to use sine. So sine of angle P equals O over H. Substituting in what I know, I have sine of 63 degrees equals opposite, I'm calling X, over my hypotenuse, 12.9. I can multiply both sides by 12.9. If you put the side on the left, 12.9 times sine of 63, put that in your calculator, you get 11.493 equals X. So this one is going to round down. We have X equals 11.49 centimeters. Okay, let's move on to our last example. Feel free to pause this video if you want to give it a try on your own. Find FD to the nearest hundredth. So FD is right here. Circle your acute angle, angle F, the acute angle that we are given. Okay, so then X is really going to be our hypotenuse because it's across from the right angle. And then the 20 meters that we are given, that is next to my angle or forming my circled angle. So that is my adjacent. So if we are working with the A and the H, that means we should use cosine. Cosine of angle F equals A, or adjacent, divided by my hypotenuse. Substitute in what you know, cosine of 39 equals 20 over X. So notice this example is a little bit different because X is now on the bottom. We're still going to use the same process to start, so we're going to multiply by that denominator on both sides. So we're multiplying by X. That way we can get the X out of the bottom. So now we have X times cosine of 39 equals 20. So now if we want to get rid of that cosine 39, we need to divide on both sides. So now X equals, if you go to your calculator and do 20 divided by cosine of 39, you should get 25.735. So look at that thousandths place. It is a 5 or more because it's a 5, so that means we round up for this one. So we get 25.74 meters.